here to the right. We'll open up the press conference. Austin Ward, the podcast.
Right, it felt like the offense really bogged down start to finish. What was some of the thinking with the run game, and were there some thoughts to adjusting it, throwing it a little bit more? There was success in the 2-minute drill. Just evaluate that offensive plan there.
Yeah, well, I think we struggled to run the ball in this game. We know we've talked about this many times. We have to run the ball, especially in this game. You know, it was a little windy out, and you know, in order to win the game, you got to be able to run it. We weren't able to do that. We tried a couple different schemes, couldn't quite get into a rhythm on that, and that ultimately, along with the turnovers and the missed field goals, was the difference in the game.
Over to the left, Cameron Teague Robinson, The Athletic.
Ryan, does you mentioned the missed field goals by Jaden. How does that? What did you say to him, and how does that affect maybe your confidence or the team's confidence in him going into the playoff?
Yeah, I'm not there right now, quite honestly. I'm still trying to digest everything that just happened. And, you know, got a locker room full of guys who are just devastated. And I thought they played with great emotion. I thought the defense played their tails off, and I thought everybody played hard. Just the overall execution wasn't good enough, especially on offense. On offense. And, you know, we couldn't control the game. In the run game, just weren't efficient enough, and overall execution wasn't good enough in a game like this, and so that's really where, you know, what I'm thinking about right now, and you know, the guys in that locker room.
Over to the right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Ryan, you talk a lot about everything always coming back to what you guys do, not about who you're playing, what you guys do. 4 straight years now, what you guys done hasn't been enough in this game. Where do you even go, and how do you pick up the pieces and trying to go forward, in particular with this game in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, you know, fresh off the game right now, and obviously extremely disappointed, and you know, angry that we didn't execute well enough. So, you know, I'm not there right now. You know, just fresh off the game, but as you know, this is not easy to accept, and you know, obviously have to take the ownership. You know, it's you know, I'm the one ultimately that, you know, makes the final decisions on things, and you know, felt like we were in a really good place coming into this game. I felt like we were prepared to play well in this game, and you know, I think, you know, you could see maybe some of the stuff that, you know, what happened in the offensive line and shuffling things around ended up, you know, really coming to a head today. You know, some of those guys, will have to look at the film and figure it out, but we just couldn't seem to get, you know, through to the second level on some runs, and you know, led to some frustration. And then, you know, I thought guys were into it, even all the way to the end. It was a great play by Jack on the goal line, just unbelievable effort right there to give the offense a chance. But, you know, go 3 and out, and it was 4th and 1 on our own, you know, in our red zone. I just felt like at that point you had to punt it, because if you don't get it there, the game's probably, you know, really in the balance. So, yeah, I don't know much more to say about it.
Over to the left, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
Ryan, the one drive you guys had success on was really the end of the first half. You guys are going tempo, no huddle. Did you think about going back to that more in the second half? And do you wish maybe you would have gone back to that more in the second half?
I mean, we tried to change up the huddle. I mean, the tempo a little bit on some things, and you know, some of it worked and some of it didn't. That drive, it worked, and it was in a 2-minute drive, and I thought it was well executed. But you know, that was, you know, just 100% throw on that, you know, that drive there. I think maybe there was a run or two, but you know, you got to stay on. You got to get first downs when you're doing that. If you don't get first downs, then, you know, it's hard to continue to play with tempo. So, you know, there were times where we tried to move it a little bit faster. You can see we didn't huddle as much today. We tried to get, you know, more plays. We thought that gave us an opportunity, but ultimately it wasn't enough.
Over to the right, Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
Ryan, you could probably look at all 4 of these games and find legit football reasons for why they went the way they went, plus other, obviously, outside factors. But at what point does this game become a mental hurdle for your team, and you maybe see that becoming part of the issue? How do you coach out of that?
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, I can just really go off of this game and what's going on in this game right now. I think each game is a little bit different and unique to itself, like you said, but the results are the results. And you know, as hard as that is to say, you know, we came up short here again today, and you know, not easy to swallow at all.
Rob Aller, Columbus Dispatch.
Yeah, Ryan, Will Howard struggled before he went into the tent, after he came into the tent. I don't know if it's concussion or if you can speak to any of that, but did you think about not sending him back out? Do you think that had anything to do with it?
I just go based off of what our doctors say, and it came out for a second, and then they said he was available and he was okay to go back in the game, and I checked with him, and he said he was in good shape and didn't recognize anything, just in terms of the interaction that led to anything other than for him to go play.
What did you see in his game that was just maybe off today?
Well, I feel like the interception, in the red area, that was, he floated a little bit and it was a little bit behind him. Didn't have a lot of zip on it, kind of died. I know he's trying to make a play on the third down in the red zone, and probably could have just thrown that away and would have had a field goal opportunity there. So, there's a fine line of trying to make plays and win the game, but also, being smart enough to, take care of the ball. And so that's the balance of playing quarterback. And I think we all know that, Will gave everything he possibly had today.
Over to the right, Bill Landis, Kings of the North.
Ryan, what was the miscommunication that caused you guys to have 12 guys on the field coming out of the timeout?
Yeah, there was miscommunication in terms of the grouping based on what they had in the game. And, they were, fast to run off the sideline, and we weren't given a ton of time to be able to match the personnel. And so in that moment, as it was getting loud, there was miscommunication, in terms of what was in the game. And, because it was moving so fast, there was a little bit of panic going on. Typically when, a group runs on the field, you get a little bit of time to make sure you make that substitution, that time was very, very fast. And so, we had to quickly, respond to that. And we didn't well enough, and we panicked, and it cost us.
Over to the left, Pat Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
Ryan, defensively, 3 drives were really all that they moved. What did you see that was successful? What did you see that kind of broke through at the end on those final 2 drives?
For them? No, they had a couple runs in there. They escaped on one of the a couple scrambles that kept them on schedule. I thought the defense kept fighting their tails off, and kept competing though. And when you're not getting as much momentum on offense, it can kind of wear on your defense a little bit. And I think that's probably more than anything what happened. But I thought they continued to fight the entire game.
Over to the right, Brandon Marcello, CBS Sports.
I'm not sure if any coach faces as much pressure as you going into the season because of the roster you built, the expectations. A lot of people say national championship or bust, and people were in there booing during the game, and people questioning you as a head coach. What do you foresee for the future of this program and for yourself?
No, everybody, wants to win this game in the worst way, and nobody wants to win it more than we do. And it's our #1 goal every year. And so when you don't, do that, there's disappointment and frustration. And so, I don't blame anybody for being upset. I'm upset, more than anybody. And, those players are too, and the coaches and everybody that goes at it. So, we know what we're getting ourselves into here.
Steve Hellwagon, 24/7 Sports.
Yeah, Coach. Third quarter, twice you're in the red zone with a first down, and they had fouled Smith twice in the end zone on pass interference. Neither of those possessions, you put the ball toward the end zone, and both of them bogged down. You come away scoreless both times, interception, missed field goal. Just, do you lament coming away from not taking a shot to put the ball in the end zone in those situations?
When a defense is playing softer, and kind of backing up like they did in this game, you have to be able to take the underneath stuff or run the football, and that's really what happened. And there were times where we tried to push the ball into the end zone, but ultimately you can't just force that. You gotta be smart in what you're doing, because they can put a cloud over him like they did and put 2 guys on him. So there's opportunities to do that. We did that, but also you got to execute in other areas, and that's what we'd always talk about in balance. And when you don't have balance and you can't run and throw the ball when you need to, then this is what happens.
Over to the right, Tim May, the Letterman and Row.
Yeah, Ryan, I was just wondering, is going through your mind the squandered opportunities? I mean, obviously a score, 2 missed field goals, et cetera. And is there anything when you and Chip were talking to each other, did you talk about throwing the ball more? I mean, for one of another term, because that seemed to be really where the opportunities were.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess we ended up throwing at the end of the game 33 times out of, I don't know how many plays we had, 59. So there were more passes than runs. But you can't just, you can't just abandon the run. You have to be able to, you have to be able to control the ball, because as we know, when you throw the ball, and it was windy today, and we didn't have a ton of time back there in terms of protection, so we tried to be smart about that. I thought, again, that we had a good plan in the pass game going in, but ultimately it wasn't good enough to execute it. But yeah, I mean, those are all things you talk about and make sure you're doing the best you can.
Yeah, this is obvious. The missed field goals are extremely disappointing, right? I mean, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but.
No, I mean, the turnovers, the rushing yards, and then you missed opportunities, like those 2 field goals. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna cost you a game like this. Every yard matters, every point matters, and it didn't get done.
Along the aisle, Jake Trotter, ESPN.
Ryan, do you have comment on the melee that happened at midfield after the game? You had staff and assistant coaches that looked like they got bloodied during the skirmish.
Yeah, I don't know all the details of it, but I know that, these guys, are looking to, put a flag on our field, and our guys weren't going to let that happen. So, I'll find out exactly what happened. But, this is our field, and certainly, we're embarrassed with the fact that we lost the game, but there's some prideful guys in this team that weren't just going to let that happen.
Over to the left, Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, just to clarify on the fight, is everybody, the health of your guys, or everybody okay, or you're just?
Yeah, I don't know if I know all that right now. There was a couple things kind of crazy that went on down there, but I think everybody's okay.
How did you address it with your guys?
Well, I talked to the team after the game, and again, without knowing all the details, there's some prideful guys on our team that aren't just going to sit back and watch that happen. So,
got time for just a couple more. Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, obviously the season's not lost. You have the playoff, but this meant so much to your guys. How concerned are you that getting past this and moving on, probably not the Big Ten championship game, if you could speak to that disappointment, but regrouping for the playoff? How tough will that be?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm fresh off the, we're fresh off the game, and so I don't really have the answer to that. Yeah, I mean, we're very disappointed. Never thought this would happen right here, and we're expecting to win this game and then go play in the Big Ten championship game, and neither of those things happen. So, we don't know what's going on now. This is just too soon to try to figure out what's next. But once we have more information in about a week, we'll figure that part of it out. I'll bring them together here pretty soon and talk to them. But there's a lot of guys who are crushed right now.
And final questions over to the right, Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row.
Yeah, kind of along those lines. You had seniors come back who said that the biggest goal was just to beat the team up north. What is the message to those guys right now? Just played very likely their final home game in this stadium.
Yeah. There's not much nothing you can say at this point. You got to take the ownership of it, and that's hard. And ultimately, it starts with me. And there's no words right now that can address any of that because of what they put into the program. And these are great guys who give unbelievable effort. And ultimately, we just didn't execute well enough in this game. And again, it starts with me and goes from there.
Great, Coach. Thank you very much.
All right, guys.
Ohio State head coach Ryan Day reacting to his team going down 13-10 in their final regular season game to the Michigan Wolverines. Their rivalry game and versus Michigan, Ryan Day has 1 win in 5 attempts. Ohio State today just 77 yards rushing. You heard Day say during a press conference, the result is the result. He also mentioned a couple of times that it was a windy day in Columbus. 252 yards of total offense, and Michigan get their first road win of the season in their biggest game of the year. More HQ coming up.